Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for coming out this evening for a candidates forum on our provincial election. I'm your host, Parthi Kandavel, also your city councillor. And this idea came out of many residents looking to me, asking our office, chatting about the complexity of the provincial election before us and their decision making. And I thought it would be an opportune space to create a conversation on the many intersecting issues that are governed by the province over municipalities, in our case, the City of Toronto. Because governance, as you all, as astute, caring, connected people, understand it's complex between the province and the city. So I thought it would be great to have a civil conversation about, with politics in full sentences, as they say. An opportunity to delve deep into these topics and have a more nuanced understanding of our candidates, who they are, and how do they think about these issues. This morning, we all heard and saw perhaps the tweet of the state of democracy in Ontario. 6% of eligible Ontario voters cast a ballot in the early voting days. It's, a historic low, but reflective of the condition of our democracy, one where we see ourselves in the middle, dead of winter, 16 months prior to its actual date of a formalized election, and in my opinion, editorialized, unnecessary, uncalled for, and in the middle of winter, harmful to democracy. So I'll stop there. But as many of you know, and I see faces who are online and in the room have worked with me as city councillor on issues impacting our community, housing for one being the biggest element where we have seen the role of the provincial government impact our ability. Ontario Land Tribunal being an important body governed by the province that has made decisions that impact our neighborhoods, our streets, our communities, as well as public transportation. I think many of you, all of us are aware of the lack of accessible public transportation in Scarborough and how that is funded or not is a central pillar of how transportation is delivered in our city through the province. Community safety has been an increasing conversation with the placement of shelters, safe injection sites, and how policing is supported. So these are complex issues that require many layers on how we understand them. And again, I appreciate everyone's participation online and in person, and a deep respect for these are nuanced perspectives, conversations, and we appreciate all perspectives. It's not, we're not here to put a party or a candidate down, but have a community conversation about how these issues intersect. And I'm grateful for the participation of the Ontario Liberal Party candidate, Qadira Jackson, the Green Party of Ontario candidate, Mark Bekkering, and their participation and all of your involvement. And we'll start the evening off with opening statements from the two candidates present. And I'll pass it off to Qadira and then Mark.
Thank you, Parthi. I'm happy to be here today. I want to introduce myself to you guys. Not everybody knows me. I am a resident of the Scarborough Southwest community. I live in Cliffcrest. I'm a lawyer, 15 years practicing. I have my own practice. I used to be a social worker. I worked in group homes and foster homes, child protection, domestic violence, detention centers, and elementary schools. I'm a mom. I have two young boys that are 4 and 7 years old. They go to school in the riding, and I'm on parent council. I'm also a director with the West Scarborough Neighborhood Community Center Board. And I used to be a councillor with the Professional Engineers Ontario. So through my life, I spent my life advocating for people as a social worker and as a lawyer, and I would like to do that as your MPP. My parents came here from the Caribbean, over 50 years, landed in Scarborough, and they came because Canada was the land of opportunity back then. And that's no longer the case under Doug Ford. Part of the reason why I'm running, so that my kids can get a good education, a free education, get a good job, and buy a house one day. Thank you.
Sorry, thank you, Qadira.
Sure. Yeah, so thank you very much for coming, and thank you, Councillor, for organizing tonight. For those of you who were at the debate last week, I outlined my reasons for running, but tonight I think I'm going to spend take my time in the opening comments to introduce myself. So I have 30 years of government experience in developing real solutions to a variety of issues. As a former mayor set up my retirement party, I have a unique talent for navigating the system to achieve real results. I worked in Hamilton for 10 years. When I was there, I managed a community-led initiative that gained international recognition for its innovative approach to engagement. The outcome of that was unanimously adopted by City Council, and it resulted among a variety of other things, about 100 changes to the official plan, reflecting what the community wanted to see happen in Hamilton. In 1999, I joined the City of Toronto, and I spent my last 13 years as manager of policy in the Environment Division. Among many successful programs like Pollinate TO and Transform TO, the Home Energy Loan Program stands out. This $20 million initiative was unanimously approved by Mayor Rob Ford in Council. And I know you're saying Rob Ford approved an environmental initiative. Let me help you understand. So this program was about helping you make your home more energy efficient, but it's a loan program, meaning it's fiscally sustainable because the repaid funds can support other homeowners. In other words, you repay your loan, we have more money to continue to support additional individuals in making their homes energy efficient. Unlike sort of the grant programs, you might remember the federal government's Greener Homes program that's sold out really fast. So only the people that got their act together, they're the only ones that actually got the benefit from it. This program is fiscally sustainable. And also because it's a loan program, the city retains that $20 million. So if something happens, we still have access to it. The homeowner incurs no cost, as loan payments are matched to their energy bill savings. This design feature also makes the program accessible to all income levels, so it's equitable. So the taxpayer saves money through reduced energy bills once the loan is repaid. The program will generate jobs, or does generate jobs because it's still in place, and it reduces climate emissions. And I'll tell you, the federal government liked the program so much, they invested $1 billion to help other cities create similar loan programs. And after retiring from the city, I've spent 4 years reviewing proposals for this fund. The last thing I'd like to mention is that the work influenced the platform of the Green Party. We're the only party that's planning to help people reduce their emissions and save money on their energy bills through energy retrofits, but with the loan program, like I just described, unlike the other parties which are proposing grant programs, which, as I articulated, only last for so long and aren't fiscally sustainable. I could give you other examples, but I think I've illustrated that how I solve problems, and because how it's worked has influenced the policy and other areas of government. I feel like I possess the experience in how to collaborate with you as residents to develop practical solutions, actions that appeal to all sides of the political spectrum, are fiscally responsible, address the climate crisis, create economic opportunities, and ensure accessibility. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion this evening.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Qadira. Our first topic is on housing. As you would imagine, is one of the biggest topics that's in discussion. And to give a sense of the format, we're spending about 20 minutes. And as part of a thematic approach to this conversation, I'll have a few questions to start. And if audience members can have concise questions, we'll entertain those as well before we move to our next bucket. So the big question I can, idea or topic that I can share that has been a tremendous challenge for many neighborhoods in our ward, and the City Councillor dealt very closely with it, is the Ontario Land Tribunal. Premier Ford, 5 years ago, reformed the previous Ontario Municipal Board, which was a body staffed with planners, architects, engineers, lawyers versed in the development world. The new Ontario Land Tribunal has been a very frustrating experience for any municipality, and certainly communities, neighborhoods, and city councillors, where we've seen reasonable accommodations of housing and density being rejected in favor of developers and their interests. What would be your voice on this topic if elected MPP? We'll start with Martin.
Yep, okay. So what's the definition of a bad policy? Definition is it's ineffective and it makes the problem worse. And that's where we've gone with the current approach to addressing the affordable housing crisis in Ontario. The approach that's been taken it started with the Liberal government, but the Conservative government have made it even worse. The solution is let's accelerate the development review process. Let's give people financial breaks. Let's remove public engagement, and let's spur private development. Well, if it worked, would we be talking about affordable housing today? No. And what's happened out of it? Started with the Land Tribunal. 97% of the decisions made by the Land Tribunal favor developers. They're not in favor of what you want as a member of the community. They're pushing the conservative approach, which is let's turn housing into a commodity instead of building homes. So they've fueled speculation. Housing costs have gone up 1,000%. Income only 200%. Figure it out. Why can't we afford to live? Why are my adult children still living in my home? We need to change it. We need to change it now. And I'm committed to that. And it's not just the Land Tribunal. It's the whole process. The provincial policy statement, what's in it, the role that we, bringing back the transparency and the openness into the decision-making process, giving you a real opportunity so that when you wake up one day and there's a big sign that says, hey, coming soon, 40-tower apartment building next door to you. No, that doesn't happen anymore. Am I supposed to? Sorry, I didn't realize how much time I got.
John, we'll give you a thumbs up when you're at 2 minutes.
So, anyway.
Qadira? Should they use the microphone? If you'd like to.
Well, yeah, it might help with the people online.
As I mentioned earlier, I live in Quebec. Was it on this whole time? As I mentioned earlier, I live in Quebec, and by knocking doors, I'm talking to constituents and they're telling me issues that they have. I think development's a big one in this community, in this riding in general. And I have people who are specifically talking to me about the Ontario Land Tribunal, and a lot of people have a perception that it's biased. The majority of developers getting what they want, as Mark mentioned. I will say that as a counselor with the professional engineers, I understand how regulatory bodies work, and I understand that the appointments look different depending on which party's in power. I'll just say that. And I've seen that firsthand in terms of the changes on the council while I was there. I'll also say that Bonnie Crombie has committed to investigate the crony appointments that the court has made in general. And I definitely think that this is one of the boards that need to be reviewed, and I think that we need to do that. In talking to people in the community, I'm hearing a lot of complaints about overcrowded rooming houses. And I don't think that they benefit anybody. I'm talking to newcomers who are complaining about feeling unsafe living in them. I'm talking to people complaining about having that many people living in one place beside them and the value to their property and what it means, and the fact that people might not be as committed and integrated into the community and not stay there long term. And I think these are all issues that are big in this riding. I also hear people complaining about multiplexes and the size of them. Sorry,
To keep it a bit organic, Mark, if you can share your thoughts on rooming houses or multi-tenant housing as it's described in the city of Toronto. It's increasingly challenging for neighborhoods, particularly suburban neighborhoods. We've seen the challenges in Brampton, in Durham municipalities. What are your thoughts on the need for a provincial framework on multi-tenant housing?
So like Qadira, sorry, you might gather that I'm not a politician. This is the first time I've ever run for election, so I sometimes get a little nervous holding the microphone. But like has been mentioned, as I've gone around knocking on doors, people have mentioned the rooming house issue. And to be honest, it wasn't an issue that I was that familiar with until, but I've spent a little bit of time looking into it. As I understand it, there is legal rooming houses, and the city has a very solid framework for managing the place, how they're regulated and how they're managed to the benefit of the people that live near them and also the people that live in them. But there's a gap in that, as people have explained to me, there's a gap in the bylaws that are allowing people to do what are deemed technically legal, but it's questionable rooming houses. And my impression that that is the real issue in our community, that there's a growing number of these houses that are falling between the crack of the current regulations. So I would suggest that that's really where we need to focus, is we need to understand better what the issue is, understand who's owning these houses, the people that are living in this house, who's living in these homes, and then figure out how do we collectively find a solution to address that that benefits everybody, people live in the neighborhood, people live in that housing, and that's something you do in partnership. It's not something the province is going to just do on its own. We have to work with the municipality, make sure that the rules that we establish at the provincial level support what the municipality wants to do, and then develop an action plan. I have to admit, sorry, I keep looking at the crowd and I'll continue, John.
But within the same genre as spoken to has been the challenge of multiplexes. The city of Toronto legalized fourplexes a year ago, and we're seeing many applications coming in. And now there's a bigger conversation, should municipalities upzone or legalize sixplexes? And with that comes implications on land value. When you upzone and provide greater permissions for investors, developers on single property lots to put up 6 units, comes other challenges. What are your thoughts on the need, if not, if you don't believe, on a provincial framework for multiplexes?
So full disclosure, the Green Party does include permitting, or include in its platform permitting multiplex development. That doesn't mean
up to 6.
That I have to be honest, I'm not sure if we've actually defined a number. Okay, I would have to get that up. But in my first reaction when I heard that, and I know the city's also pushing forward on the policy, is do I want to live next to that? But in the right place, in the right situation, it can work. And I'll give you an example. My stepfather lives in Oshawa, and he lives in a neighborhood, small houses, really big lots. To give you a sense how big the lot is, he could park 10 cars on his driveway in his garage. The house next to him burnt down, and the city of Oshawa gave authority for a triplex, so 3 units, not 6plex, but 3. And when I drive up to his house, it does look a little odd. I mean, it stands out. It doesn't fit with the neighborhood in terms of how it looks. But because the lot is so big, you don't have the parking issues. There is capacity to park. The person that owns the property lives in one of the units, so the landlord is actually there to manage if there are issues with the people that are renting the other 2 units, and so on. So it can work, but it has to be in the right place, in the right location, and as I think you're alluding to, Councillor, in a way that addresses other issues like transit access, access to parking, and so on. And I think, if I were elected, that would be the direction I would take and push for, is that, if we're gonna set a provincial framework for it, it's gotta be a framework that manages it properly. Because we do need the housing, as we all know, we need it for an affordable housing issue. So we have to find ways to make it work, but not work to the detriment of everything else.
The Liberal Party is not pushing multiplexes. We're pushing for more co-ops and apartments. I personally think that 6 is too many to be in one multiplex. I think that it's about, as Mark said, it's about fit and it's about consultation. As a social worker, I think that it's very important that you talk to people on the ground and you understand what the issues are and what people are comfortable with, because different communities will tell you different things. And sometimes things come up that you're not going to expect. I think that, maybe 3 would be more reasonable than 6, but again, it depends on the situation and where you are. We're focusing on co-ops and rental apartments, and I think we're not making a priority to push.
Thank you. At this point, if there are questions from the audience on housing, please be concise.
There was an article in the Toronto Star a couple months ago that management companies are fighting and buying up all sorts of affordable apartments, turning them around, and people suddenly are getting real evil because they can't afford the $500 or $600 bump that suddenly comes from the same apartment they were living. And these guys are out of control. They're all over the place now. They're buying up what I would say the old affordable building. So how do you stop this? I mean, it's also what are you going to call it? Fourth is left, the barn also is up. But I mean, is there no way, like, how did this happen in the first place?
Thank you. I'll add a little caveat. Provincial law stipulates that any apartment building that's being bought for redevelopment, the folks who are living there have the right to return. So, but I think your question is still valid. Given that legislation, folks are displaced, and that's a burden I don't think any of us would want to on our own current homes. But what are your thoughts on this reality in Scarborough Southwest? We saw many on Kingston Road, low-rise, affordable apartments being essentially dem-evicted. What are your thoughts on the role of the province?
I think whose turn it is to go first.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay. Well, we got rid of rent control. I mean, yeah, in theory it's still in place, but it's not. So that's the starting point right there, is we've got to bring back real rent controls. The next thing is there are legislative options to prevent and reduce the renoviction approach. And it's a strong commitment of the Green Party and its platform to figure that out and put those rules in place. So the short answer is, let's just, instead of treating housing as a commodity, let's get back to treating it as a home, as a place for people to live, and put in rules to rein in this kind of activity that you're talking about.
I think we need to make sure that there aren't any loopholes for people to fall through the cracks. I personally know people that are being displaced because they can't afford the new rent. And it's traumatic for the person going through that. The Liberal Party has committed to phased-in rent control, and I spent a lot of my adult life as a renter myself, and I've actually had experiences where my landlord found a way to try to squeeze me. She wanted to add $175 to my rent because my child turned a certain age, and her excuse was that I was using more hydro. And when I said that, I'm a lawyer, right? She said yes. But, I have a son who has lots of fights with his girlfriend, and he might need somewhere to live soon. So I know it went a little bit off topic, but I think that there are loopholes that landlords use to their advantage that need to be tightened up. And of course, the first thing that the local party is committed to is phased in.
So Mark, you mentioned a couple of times about housing being a commodity right now. And I do feel like a big problem, of course, with it being a commodity is that there's no real avenue for anyone who's building housing to want to make housing cheaper or rents cheaper. And so in my mind, it feels like the most logical way to get affordable housing and affordable rents is more public options, like Qadira, you mentioned co-ops. So I was wondering what the party's commitments are towards perhaps more public options.
What the first is done?
I wanted to add that the Liberal Party has committed to cutting out some of the development charges and taxes. A large part of the cost of housing has to do with the amount of development charges. And developers don't like them either. It's preventing them from building. And I know as a real estate lawyer, I have come across developers telling me that they're stuck because of the amount of fees that they're paying. So that's one of the things that we've committed to. On average, we're going to cut off $170,000 of development tax. And of course, as I said, I don't have the details of our plan yet, but we have committed to co-ops and more markets.
So the Green Party's approach is two interventions. The first, like you mentioned, let's get back in the business and build publicly owned housing. And we're making a commitment of 250,000 housing units over the next 10 years. Plus, we're also going to invest in the renewal of the 300,000 units that exist today, which are to a large degree are falling apart because of the lack of funding. And that was a download that was made onto the municipalities. The second side of the equation is targeted regulations and incentives to spur private development of 2 million homes, with the majority being affordable to the moderate income homeowner, and providing where we can financial supports like eliminating the land transfer tax so that young or new home buyers can actually get into the market. And then the third part, sorry, I did say it was two, there's three. The third part is reining in the speculation and a series of regulations to actually control speculation and reduce the impact of people trying to turn housing into a commodity. If I could just mention last thing, if I have time, the other part of the strategy is addressing homelessness, which we all know is at a crisis level in our city and the province. And so we're committed to building 60,000 new supported housing units with the necessary wraparound services, the mental health and addiction support services, personal support services to help people get off the street and actually live in this supportive housing. The first step is we actually have to give them a place to live, and that's what we're going to do.
Any other questions on housing? Very quickly.
Sure. Mark, I had a question. You said about eliminating the land transfer tax. I'm a realtor, so I've never seen it as a deterrent for young people. The land transfer tax. It's other things when they're buying real estate. But because he was mentioning the rooming houses here. If I focus just on Scarborough Southwest, like I've seen people living here in 1-2 bedroom apartments, like 12, 14 people. So if you guys are building more public homes and the prices are not within the reach, the rent is not within the reach, like as Qadira said, Liberal Party is saying that they are doing more co-ops. So co-op will mean the rent will be as much whatever they are making, but your public housing, how will the rents be manageable for those people right now living on those rooming houses?
So the short answer, it's the same approach. I kind of lump co-ops and community housing together, and I apologize if I misspoke. But community housing is a mix of some market but housing that be rented here or affordable to people of low to moderate income. So that would be the the approach that is, well, that's the approach that's in place today, and we would obviously continue.
So will you do something for those people who are paying now $500 to stay in that unit? Like will the new rent will be just ask for $500?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Those people living in roomy houses, they are basically paying like $500 to $600 every month. Yeah. Can they afford those new units?
Yes, that would be affordable to them. That's the intent, is that people can't get into the housing market because the rents are so high, or if they want to buy, they can't buy. And they're put into the situation where they're living in a rooming house, or legal or illegal, because that's all they can afford. Community housing and co-op housing would provide that opportunity for them to either pay $500 a month, or if their income is such, a rent-to-geared approach, or a rent-to-geared-to-income approach.
One final question from Eric.
Oh, sorry, should we add something?
The Liberal Party committed not only to first-time buyer taxes being eliminated, we've also committed to downsizing seniors. I don't feel like they should be penalized when they're downsizing, but I think that we've also created a rental emergency support fund for tenants called REST. And this is an emergency short-term interest-free loans to prevent evictions. I've seen people lose their house because of $15,000. And I know this is about rent, but I'm just saying sometimes people just need a little help to get over that little 1 month, and that month can make the difference for them. We also want to streamline things by modernizing the building codes and have a provincial catalog of pre-approved housing designs so that we can avoid a lot of the red tape in development planning, because they'll have pre-approved. I think these are some of the ways that we're trying to streamline and build faster. And also we're discussing the conversion of underutilized offices and commercial spaces to create homes.
So, over 4 years ago, the government decided to build modular housing for the homeless at 11 Macy Avenue. It's been 4 years. The situation has deteriorated constantly. There used to be a plan for 3 meals a day. We cut it back to 1 meal a day. We cut it back to 2 meals a day. There's also some mold issues. Work orders take forever to get fulfilled. There's rampant drug addictions. And there's break-ins all over the place. The door locks aren't adequate. And the mental health supports aren't adequate.
Eric, your question is very valid. It's coming up in our community safety section. Can we hold it until then?
Well, I'm almost,
Okay,
well
go
done.
ahead. Go ahead.
So how can we, what are you gonna do about the situation? Why has it taken so long to deal with it?
So it ties in with the question. I know exactly what you're talking about. I fully support your question. If I could just add a little piece to it. What are you gonna do about it? To Eric's point, but also do you support, because currently at the municipal level, there isn't a set of criteria that governs how, where, what factors should be in play, or criteria on the placement of a shelter for unhoused people. How do you approach this reality and this question?
Short answer is consultation, of course. Also, too, we have to make sure there's not too many shelters in one area. They should be spread out and close to resources. It doesn't make sense to have a shelter if people are not close to the services that they need. As a social worker, I've actually worked in homeless shelters, and I've actually seen the mold firsthand in the showers. I've seen the poor quality food myself. I'll be honest, I was completely shocked. Fresh out of social work school, and people are lined up for one piece of bread and peanut butter, and that's breakfast. So your points are valid, your complaints are valid, and I'm empathetic, having seen it firsthand. Sorry, I forgot the question. Was there a specific question?
Basically, what it was. I think the bottom line is there's not enough funding for the programs, and are you going to deal with that?
Well, I think that the bigger picture is important too. Nobody should be in a homeless shelter, but you can't deem it illegal and not have a solution. So the Liberal Party is committed to working on solutions rather than criminalizing people who are homeless. So I think the solution is obviously affordable housing. And of course, if you do find yourself in a shelter, you deserve better than a piece of white bread.
So the issue of homelessness is probably the issue that frustrates me the most, because you know what? The solution, there's a viable solution, and we do it. We already have it in place here in Toronto. I mean, there's organizations in Toronto that are creating affordable, supportive housing. They're providing mental health, addiction support, personal support services, and they've got clients that are successfully living in this. They're not in homeless shelters. So I agree. The long-term solutions, we got to get our act together and provide that kind of service. And the only way we're going to do that is if we also recognize mental health as a public health issue. Well done study by the Canadian Mental Health Association recently that identified the massive underfunding across Canada. It's not just Ontario. Ontario ranked out, I think, number 10 in terms of its ability to fund mental health services. We've got to fund it. We've got to bring up the wages of the people that live in it, because I know that there's huge turnover in that sector because the wage that they get paid is just barely fits into the cutoff for a livable wage. So there's turnover. They're not making a salary. So of course they're not. There's constantly staff shortages, etc. To provide the mental health support services. We got to provide the upstream services. To help reduce, sorry, let me reframe this. If we do this, if we actually do it seriously, we're going to be able to afford it because it will reduce the demand on our police services, it will reduce the demand on our emergency shelter, or emergency services, public health services. It will give it free up funding to actually do this from other places or help us address the issues in those communities.
So this issue is one very pertinent to our community. We in fact have the second most shelters in all the suburban wards in the city of Toronto. In fact, we have 5, including 11 Macy. We have a 6th being constructed on Kingston Road near Midland. Lodge, Healing Lodge for recently incarcerated Indigenous women. And we have a 7th shelter coming in the Blantyre community, which is 100 meters from a daycare. The question on the mind of many, because we have wards, Don Valley East, 0 shelters. Don Valley West, 0. Next door in Beaches, East York, just 160 bed. Should there be a criteria devised by the province that guides the placement of shelters? What are your thoughts? Yes, no.
Sure. I'll take the easy questions.
And I guess the second part, will you be a voice as NPP to create a criteria approach to shelter placement?
So I'll be honest, right? I'm no different than anybody else. If one day I woke up and there was an announcement that a homeless shelter was going to be built next door to me, my first reaction is going to be my family, my safety, and is this going to work? That's a normal, and I think normal and very typical or valid concern. Location, right? I mean, it's not as simple as saying, everybody gets a fair share, because every community is different. So you have to look at the land use planning or the land use that's available in the community. And yes, some communities might end up with 3 or 4 shelters, while others only end up with 1 or potentially 0. I thought, well, that's a bit odd. I think the real issue is not a criteria for where to build the shelters, but rather making sure we're actually designing these things and putting in place the services that guarantee the safety and security for everybody and the businesses that are near them. And we need to spend the time to actually engage with the community before. I know I was reading some of the newspaper articles about the shelter near Quarry Cafe, I'm not sure what the neighborhood is, and how you were surprised, Councillor, that just like everybody else was, that the shelters being built. Well, I mean, I tried to read the city reports that justified that policy. They're incredibly dense and thick, but that's not the right way to do things. There has to be, you have to be involved, and then there has to be consultation, and then with that, you actually come up with right solutions. So,
I definitely think that proximity to, from one shelter to the other does matter, and I do think that it should be more evenly spread out. And I think that each community should have um, a reasonable amount of shelters. And of course, as I mentioned, as a social worker, I think I've always had a client-centered approach. So I think that the community involvement and consultation is number one. And I think as I said, shelters should be close to resources and not beside a daycare.
Well, I guess would you be a voice to support a provincial framework that guides the placement of shelters?
If my constituents want me to be, yes, I will.
Yes, I think Parthi asked the question that I was going to ask myself. My question is, where do you stand on Doug Ford's ban on safe injection sites within 200 meters of childcare or daycares? Because we hear a lot from politicians that this is a division, a divided approach, municipal, federal, provincial. But in that case, the provincial government stepped in and made that kind of ruling where there can be no injection sites. But we've heard from the city of Toronto specifically on the proposed shelter in Blantyre that they will be giving out drug paraphernalia. They will be giving those things to residents to be able to safely administer drugs, not on site, and that's closer than 100 meters from daycare and next to two schools, elementary schools. So the question, I guess, to reframe it is, we hear it's divided, but will they take a provincial approach to stop mismanagement that may have happened within the division?
I think that's a very good question. And I think that I've seen personally the effects of having safe injection sites close by communities. And I've seen people complain about finding needles on their lawns. And I think it's a safety issue if it's close to a school, because the last thing you want is for your children to find that in the playground or on the lawn. So I definitely do agree with you that it should not be too close to schools because of the safety issue. It's not merely a matter of not in my backyard, it's an actual safety.
So the Green Party in this platform does say that we need to continue with safe injection sites. The approach that the Conservatives have taken is we turned it into a criminal justice issue, and that's not going to solve the problem. But we need to keep sort of that health and human rights framework how we're approaching this. That said, that doesn't mean we're in support of let's just build injection sites wherever we want to. We need to have that framework. We need to have that policy in place that guides where the injection sites are going to be, or the homeless shelter, so that we're all going to feel safe and secure in our neighborhood. And we also need to ensure that the funding is in place so that you can actually manage these places properly. So, in short, we need to continue to provide safe injection sites because it's the right thing to do. It's a compassionate approach to dealing with this issue, but I'm not personally in support of just willy-nilly building wherever you want. There has to also be clear guidelines. If that requires the province to do it, then sure. And as was already said, I'm totally in agreement. If you as a constituent say we need those guidelines, then I would be there to defend it, or not defend it, but support it and advocate for it.
Thank you, and that's our segment on community safety. Yeah, sure. We're just going to move to transportation. Our next.
Before we move on to housing, I have a question that hasn't been addressed. One item that has not been brought up at all is the landlord-tenant board. This falls under the province, and right now it's a failing system. It can take 10 to 12 months to have a hearing. Property owners who may have a space to provide a rental space are fearful of doing so due to lack of enforcement that their landlord-tenant board. On the renter side of things, many landlords are not maintaining their properties as they are not residing at the property or they are foreign investors. What do you plan to do to reform the landlord-tenant board?
Great question, Tanya. It was on my list, but I do want to give justice, but we'll take that question because it's very, very relevant.
I'm very glad you asked it because the Ontario Liberal Party has committed to reducing wait times to 2 months to help move these things along faster. That benefits landlords and tenants.
I'm not sure, our policy is much different. Yes, the landlord-tenant board does not work the way it's currently functioning. It needs to be tossed out and reformed, and a new approach taken, and real clear commitments to get things, have hearings done and done within a very timely manner, like 2 months.
Excellent. Thank you. The other significant intersection between us as a city and the province is on public transportation. For decades, we saw public transit in Scarborough going willy-nilly until some finality or certainty was brought with the Scarborough subway. However, east of Kennedy, east of McCowan, which is still the bulk of Scarborough, we have an unfunded plan. Recently, the City of Toronto has put forth 2 projects to the province of Ontario for funding consideration: a waterfront LRT and the Eglinton East LRT. How will your party, how will your voice progress, advance public transportation in Scarborough?
So a few facts, right? The road network in Toronto was built in the 1970s. It hasn't grown since then. We've added 400,000 people, a larger area, 2 million people. We've added 1.2 million cars, and us government's done nothing. So finally, in the last couple of years, they finally actually started to invest in things. They've left Toronto on its own. They downloaded transit costs and just made it worse. So priority number 1, and this is the Green Party's commitment, is we get back in the game and we upload the 50% funding that the province used to do for transit. So transit operation and capital costs, so that we have more stable funding. Because the reality is, we're going to do congestion and get around the city, we need better transit. We are committed to the Eglinton East. I'm not 100% sure right now if the Shepherd East is still in the plan, but I know it's definitely a commitment to build things. Expand GO Transit, so there's intercity transit. And the next big thing, we need to figure out how we build transit, because right now we're building transit that's incredibly late. I mean, I went to the TTC Riders Rally. What are we talking about? 13, 15 years since they started construction of the Eglinton Crosstown LRT. We don't know why, because Metrolinx is a closed door. So
We'll get to that question.
Yeah, but let me finish this. Part of the solution is open up the door. Let's find out what the problem was, so we can make sure when we build Eglinton East and Shepherd, we don't make the same friggin' mistakes because of transit that's, cities around the world are building transit way cheaper than we're doing. And I don't know why we're spending so much money, because we have a government that's closed the doors and everything.
The Ontario Liberal Party has committed to the Eglinton East LRT to make it a priority. And I personally would commit to advocate for the Eglinton East LRT over the waterfront, because we don't have an alternative for transportation, and downtown has lots of alternatives. So I would advocate for the Scarborough East, Eglinton East LRT. The Liberal Party has also committed to the Shepherd LRT. It doesn't go into our riding per se, but it's gets people around Scarborough. So I definitely think that's something that we're proud of. We've also committed to expand the GO transit substantially. We're gonna have a GO station through Toronto through the Midtown line. And what I'm most proud of is the Office of Cost Control Oversight that we've committed to. And that's to oversee public secure procurement projects municipally and provincially. And that's to oversee the spending on transportation projects. Perfect example, Metro.
And on that note, I think I have to remind everyone, $1 billion over, 5 years now over its opening deadline. How will your party approach the governance of this private-public partnership that is Metrolinx? What reforms will your party make? How will you be a voice?
So as I said, open the doors. Let's get Metrolinx accountable to all of us. So we ought to know what decisions they're making and why and what money they're allocating. It's also be an opportunity for us to learn and understand why they chose to do this bizarre, convoluted private-public partnership, which I suspect once we open the doors, we're going to find out that is the reason why the costs have gone over $1 billion beyond. It's because they've created a system that just doesn't work. TTC riders are advocating that to make things more transparent, we turn over operation and development or construction of all transit in Toronto back to the TTC, because TTC is accountable to City Council, and City Council is probably one of the most, or any municipal council is probably one of the most accountable and open decision-making that you can have. It's the nature of municipal government. And I personally support that. I can't tell you that the Green Party's made that commitment, but we definitely are committed to figuring out what's going on and fixing it and making it definitely more transparent.
As I mentioned, we committed to review Metrolinx specifically through our Office of Cost Control.
Questions on transportation?
I have never heard of the waterfront LRT. Any LRT strikes me with absolute fear, because I know that's gonna butter up what we have already. Where's the waterfront LRT?
So it's along the Queen's Quay. The design work has been advanced, but there's no funding currently. The city has requested the province for funding and has placed both as priorities. If I could share my personal opinion, I think the Eglinton East LRT serving Scarborough should be the first priority given the transit inequity that we have across our city. So I'll leave it at that.
Is the waterfront LRT hook up of Doug World?
I'm not exactly sure, but I would imagine you would connect with the Ontario line inside of that city.
All right.
Questions on public transit, transportation? Okay, great. Our next topic is on the role of MPP. And this is one that has tremendous value through a qualitative lens. Many neighborhoods are effectively served through the convergence and advocacy of all elected positions. How would you, if elected the member of provincial parliament for Scarborough Southwest, work and serve with other elected representatives for this community?
Very well.
Some more details?
I was trying to be cute, but I will emphasize that I already have a seat with Parthi, with Minister Blair, who actually endorsed me. So I don't think I'll have any issue whatsoever because I already have great rapport with all of the different levels of politicians in Scarborough Southwest.
For me, it's kind of an obvious answer. Of course, you're going to work with the other elected representatives, because it's only when you work together that you actually create real solutions. I mean, everybody that's in the both elective office, like yourselves, are engaged in your community because you love your community. You want to make things happen to the benefit of everybody and support one another. So why would you want to set yourself up to be in competition or fighting with the other elected officials when really we're all here for the same reason? So of course I would do that and do the best I could at that. One of the things that I learned through a program that I was involved in was an international program that involved people from a variety of different professions and from 8 different countries. And it was a leadership training program. And it taught me that solutions come from the diversity. They don't come from, I'm the one. And we know we can all envision the leader of a party right now, former premier, hopefully, that has that mindset that I have the solutions. I don't need to listen to anybody. We're having an election today because he thinks he's the one that can only solve the problems. And the reality is the other 3 parties said, we'll step up, we'll work with you, we'll make things happen, and we will collectively stand up to Trump and tariffs. That doesn't work. And that's how I would approach things, is I would work with everybody. Not just the fellow elected officials, but I want to work with the people that live in this community, hear your concerns, hear your solutions, and make them happen.
To build on this topic, how will you, and please be specific, engage with the community after being elected? So what mechanisms, commitments can you make as an elected MPP to engage and interact with the community, whether it's as individuals, residents associations, community advocacy groups?
Sorry, should I go first? I think it's my turn. So it's about openness, communication, and being available, I think, are the key principles behind how do you engage with people and involve with them. So key responsibility, let's say I'm elected and we're in opposition. My key responsibility is to make sure you as residents are aware of what's happening in the province, where the opportunities are for you to be engaged, to support you in being engaged, and then, if necessary, work with you to build the coalition or the collaboration to actually fight that. If it's something we disagree with, fight that out, that activity. You know, whether that's through advocacy, letter writing, or showing up at Queen's Park and protesting. The second is, listening. So how do I creating the right forums where I can have the opportunity to listen to you. So that's regular meetings, regular forums, creating opportunities for you to send me letters, email me, whatever, with your concerns, and listening and responding. And I've run out of time, so there's a lot more to it, but I think you get the theme.
I'm not an expert on policy, which is why I'm so big on consultation. I want to learn from the constituents, and I have been, and I go everywhere I'm invited. And I've met with a lot of different groups, gone to religious companies, even, and talking to residents, organizations, and of course, as I mentioned earlier, I'm on a parent council at my kids' school. I'm talking to parents every day, and I think it's important to continue doing that. With the West Scarborough Neighborhood Community Center, where I'm a director, you can ask Josh, every opportunity I could, I come during the day to the actual programs, so I can learn from the people who run the programs. So I'm committed to already doing that. I spent my life doing that, and I will continue to consult and meet with people. I will organize visual town halls if I need to. I will come to events, I'll sit and talk, I'll stay later, whatever I have to do to understand what everybody needs and try to balance all the different needs and wants.
Before we open to the floor, my next and last question on this topic: if elected, and in the scenario your party is in power, and you have the levers and the budget of power, what is the confidence you can give to our community that you will be not just a strong voice, but an effective voice to bring the necessary investments to our ward? All right, I'll give you a moment to think about it. Not just how will you be an effective voice to bring investments to our ward, whether it's financial investments, whether it's policy advancements that are in the community interest.
So one of the things that, before I decided to run for election, so the chat with Mike, the leader of the Green Party, he made it very clear to me. The way we do things in the Green Party is your boss, first and foremost, is the constituents of the riding you represent, not me as the leader of the Green Party. So you have a responsibility to make sure you're reflecting the views, the issues, the concerns of your residents. It's not my responsibility to listen to Mike and then try and convince you that the Green Party's got it all right. And he made it very clear. Also, that may lead to times when my view or the approach that I would take on an issue is going to differ from the Green Party. And if it may potentially lead to me voting separately from the Green Party. And he emphasized that that's okay. Difference of opinion and views are accepted within the party. You're not punished for it because, as I mentioned earlier, our primary role is to be here for the people of Scarborough Southwest in this case.
Can you repeat the question?
Nope, that's an important question. How will you be not just a strong, but an effective voice if elected and if your party's in power to bring the necessary investments to Scarborough and be in it? How will you advance policy or budget that improves Scarborough Southwest?
Well, first of all, I want to emphasize that my education and experience covers social work, psychology, dispute resolution, and law. These are all things that I've learned and tools that I have to work with people. I don't want you to misunderstand my demeanor because I'm calm and laid back, but you can ask my partner what I need to be. I'm fierce. I'm not afraid of anybody, and I will push whatever I have to do to get my constituents heard. And I received some advice when I was considering whether or not to run from our neighboring MP, Daniel Smith, and I'll never forget it. I love what he said. He said, I vote how my constituents want me to, because I'm not afraid of the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario being that you don't get reelected, you go back to law and have more time with your kids. I said, that's great. I'm not afraid of the worst case scenario. So I plan to do that, and I will emphasize that if I win, it's because of hard work and representing everybody. I don't owe any favors to anybody, and nobody owns me. I don't have to consider any one perspective. I will consider everybody's perspective. I will vote how I want to vote. I will advocate for what my constituents want me to, and I'm not afraid of the worst case scenario. And I think that having that attitude actually makes people want to vote for you if they feel heard.
Thank you, both of you. On this topic of MPP as advocate.
I have a two-part question, and I confess the fact as a partner, laid back attitude is really indicative of she really can fight for you guys. Now, I have a two-part question. The first one is in relation to the whole idea of meeting your community needs and working for the ride in itself. I'd like to know why you chose the Liberal Party to be with that. It's not just a vacant seat that you're jumping into because it's vacant. You might get a chance of winning. But what's your history with the Liberal Party? And the second thing is, how does your values tie into that party personally?
Okay, can I just rephrase it? Why did you guys choose the party that you're running for? It's a good question.
The history of the party is important. You're not just jumping on board now. It's a history with it. You've built a certain history with the politicians, with the community, the partnerships. That's important.
I'm gonna tell you a story. My father was involved in the Ontario Labour Party, and one day he said to me, "Come with me, we're gonna go see John McCain." I said, "Okay." So I did what any daughter would do, I dressed nice to go to this man's office. I get there, and if any of you know him, he's quite a character, so he was standing on a chair and trying to get everyone excited. My dad said, "Keep walking." We went to the back, and he had me picking up signs, putting them in the car. And next thing you know, I'm standing on someone's lawn and my heels are sinking into the grass, putting in big signs. Anyone knows how to put in big signs, it's a lot of work. And I came back after that and I was helping in an MPP in Scarborough. And I started off just stapling polling packages, and I kind of caught the bug, and I kind of felt included, and I continued going around. Then I became a writing president. I was a vice president before that. And I think that I felt at home in the party. And so I continued to get involved, and I've been involved since 2008 very actively. And I want to emphasize that through those experiences and knocking doors with other politicians, I know what I'm up against. I know what's expected of me. I'm not going to be surprised when I see the amount of work that's going to be, thrown at me if I win or when I win. So I just want to emphasize that I have always been loyal to the party. I see the values that they have for working families, and this is why I'm.
So, I haven't been a member of the Green Party for very long. I've been voting Green for a number of elections, but I actually only officially joined the party in 2024. But let me tell you why I joined the Green Party. I told you a little bit about my work history and one of the guiding principles in the work that I've always done for 30 plus years is the notion of balance. That we need to make decision-making that balances our economy, the environment, and our community well-being. When we put a focus on one aspect over the other, think of it as a three-legged stool, puts it out of balance. And that's what the decision-making we've been doing for too long has been doing. We focus on the environment, focus on the economy, we've created environmental issues. We make a shift and we focus on community, well-being, social justice issues, and then we put people out of work and we don't have the money to pay for it. So for me, why did I pick the Green Party? Because I looked at the different platforms, the different approaches of the parties, and the Green Party is the party that aligns with that principle, or that belief, or aligns with it the best from my perspective. Because they are the only party that's talking about how we can actually solve the climate change crisis in a way that will maintain our economy, grow our economy, generate jobs, which then in turn maintains the economic well-being to fund the social programs that we need so that we actually address healthcare crisis, homelessness crisis, the housing affordability crisis, but does it in balance and not to offer you short-term, knee-jerk solutions that are whole well and really don't actually solve the problem. It's a party that's offering you a long-term, sustainable, balanced approach that's fiscally responsible and balances the three legs of the stool.
Further questions on the topic of the role of MPP as advocate and as community representative? I have an additional, Netta.
I have a question about, I haven't heard this a lot, is what is your voice to Trump and your party's voice in the tariffs that are coming, and what you can do? So the question relates to this riding, this province and Canada. So I would like your opinions.
Yeah. No, it's a very good question, and I've already mentioned it, but I'm going to reemphasize it. See, there's no I in leadership, right? So we have a current premier that believes that only he can solve the solution. He's the only one who can negotiate with us. But the reality is, we've all got to stand together, not just as different parties, but provinces, territories, and with the federal government. So that's step one, or the most important step. Let's build partnership to actually, so that we are collectively working together to address whatever is going to come down the pipe with the potential tariffs and whatever else stupidity comes out of the United States. And that's what I call true leadership. If you want leadership that's going to stand up to Trump, and you think, Doug Ford is the only person that has that ability, well, I've known Mike Schreiner for 16 years, and he's a very polite, very soft-spoken in some ways person. But when I sat across the table from him 16 years ago, it was a negotiation, and he was not backing down on things. So I think, to be honest, I think all four leaders have that ability. The real thing is, do they have the ability to build the collaboration, the partnership to make it happen? Specific things do we do? I could list them for you, but you know what? All four parties have basically got the same solution in terms of the specific things that we would do. Tariff, tax force, tax breaks, etc.
But what would you do individually in this party? What are your plans to kind of help this?
Sure. Okay, now that's a good, fair question, and a very good question. And I think the thing that what I would do within the riding is make sure I understand what parts of our community are going to be affected by it, and make sure they're aware of what plans are going to be put in place to help support them. So if there's businesses that are going to lose business and potentially have to lay off employees, obviously, just like we did or collectively did during the COVID crisis, there's going to be supports put in place. They're going to make sure that people know that they're available, make sure they get access to them. So that kind of thing.
Well, tariffs are extremely important. I don't think that's the real reason why we have an election right now. I think that all the party leaders have agreed that they would work with boards, so this is not necessary. My party has been working on the economy in general in a lot of different ways, like fixing healthcare and education, but more specifically in terms of tariffs, Bonnie Crombie has committed to invest in the, sorry, I was trying to find the word, in the industries that are going to be affected. She just came out with a more detailed plan that I encourage you guys to look at. In terms of the specific writing, I don't know exactly which areas are going to be affected, but I will advocate for our community in every way that I can. And as I said, I want you guys to see the well laid out policies. I don't want to bore you, but we have it, and we agreed to invest in our industries that are affected by tariffs.
Thank you, Netta, for the question, an important one. So no direct intersection, but tremendous impact. There's one story I want to share with you guys. It's the story of Tubular Steel. Google them. They're in our ward at Kennedy and Danforth Road. Just amazing company under the radar. They build the tubular steel that holds, if you have a CRV, a Civic, a RAV4, they build the headrest, not that the actual soft part, but the steel that holds the headrest up right here in our ward. And of course, a great deal going towards the US. So direct impact, and that's an employer, 150 plus well-paying jobs in our ward. So the impacts will be real on the tariff conversation. I want to pivot back to the role of MPP as advocate. And curious to your thoughts in many European and South Asian countries, there is governance by coalition, that parties come together to form government and govern through the intersection of their interests. In that scenario, because we've had it before, decades ago, but we've had scenarios where parties govern together. What are your thoughts on it? And what potential do you think, positive potential, could exist or negative? What are your thoughts on governing together?
My party doesn't talk about any coalitions, and I definitely want to be careful what I say.
This is a personal question. Individual.
What I will say is that I have an ability to make friends, and I have friends that are not necessarily liberal. I will also mention that I know a lot of the candidates that are running right now and people who are in the party, and I think it's important that I have good rapport with them because we do discuss policies and create our platform together. So I would be great in terms of advocating my riding's position and leveraging my connections with people and my ability to persuade. So I will say that in general, in terms of other parties, I have always been open and nonpartisan. I did my articling with QP the Union, so I had a lot of friends and still do that are NDP. So I definitely think that having those friendships are important. I'm not going to make a strong statement about it, but I will say that I'm open to hearing other perspectives in general and banding together with the other candidates that I have good rapport with.
So the Green Party has a slogan, and I know we want to go deeper than the slogan, so I'm going to try and do that. And the slogan is, we do politics differently. Behind that is the philosophy that we reach across, they call it the aisle, and actually look to build collaboration and partnership with other parties. So the short answer is, the Green Party believes very much in what you're talking about, that the solutions that we need are solutions that are going to come when we work together. And you know what? That's what you expect when you vote for somebody, or that's what you expect the political parties should be doing. Not standing there yelling at each other, criticizing one another and saying, I could do it better. What you want, and I want, is political parties that are going to work together to actually give you solutions so that when we are here to 4 years from now or 2 years or whatever it takes before we have the next election, we're not talking about the same friggin' issues again. We might actually move on to some other issues. So we're not talking about housing again. We're not talking about homelessness, but we've actually solved the problem, and we do it collectively. And I've told you a bit about my history in terms of different programs I've been involved in, how I approach things. And that's part of the reason why I joined the Green Party, because that is how we want to do things. And that is build bridges, not sit back and criticize and say, I'm the best person to do things.
There are two questions I was remiss to ask. Did you go? Sorry. Qadira. Okay, excellent. Two questions that are important on this intersection. Within transportation, there has been recent legislation by the provincial government on the placement and removal of cycling lanes or bike lanes. What is your and your party's position on that legislation, which specifically speaks that the municipality cannot remove driving lane, a motor vehicle lane, and being replaced with bicycle?
So every 4 years we have a municipal election. And you know, if you don't agree with what the council of the day did, if you didn't agree with those bike lanes or some other decision, then you stick up your hand and say, I'm going to vote for this person because they're going to reverse that decision. That's how democracy works. And that's the way it should work. It shouldn't be, let's wait for turn to, let's face it, unelected party, because they represent less than 20% of the elected eligible voters in Ontario, primarily from ridings outside of Toronto, and have them tell us in Toronto how we want to run our business. That's not the way it should be. Municipalities need some protection and autonomy. So the Green Party, we're committed to municipal reform. So exploring the idea of a city charter, which would give municipalities protection from the next premier that says, I don't like how the city's being run, so I'm going to tell the elected council how they're going to do things. A city charter that gives you the city the responsibilities, the authorities, and the guidelines, and probably, hopefully, the right kind of financial tools to actually deliver the services that we need in the city.
So just to be clear, you would repeal the legislation? Your party would repeal it?
Yeah, well, I would remove the province from
The ability to govern.
remove the province from telling the city what to do. I mean, you need provincial.
On this issue or all complete municipal autonomy?
No,
That's what the
it's not
city
a
charter-
like that, but it's, right, it's, I mean, let's use land use planning as an example. There's a provincial policy statement that guides land use planning across the province, because broadly speaking, there's a provincial interest that has to be met. But when that policy statement goes down to the nitty-gritty and engaging in telling municipalities how to do what we ask municipalities to do and are mandated to do, then that's wrong. And that's what I would be changing.
I think Bonnie's clear that she's not going to rip up bike lanes because she has bigger things in mind that are gonna cost money, that are more important, like healthcare. We didn't talk much about safety either, but we're going to put barricades for the TTC. And a lot of people ask, how are you gonna pay for that? She said, I'm not digging up the bike lane. So,
So did she commit to repealing the legislation?
I don't think she did, but she committed to not dig the bike lanes, but I definitely don't think that bike lanes should take the place of a lane for a car. If it's gonna make our roads more congested, then that doesn't make any sense. If there's a way that, it's not affecting traffic.
So for clarity, she won't remove bike lanes, and she won't repeal the legislation. It would continue.
I'll be honest, I'm not sure. She's specified that, but I know that she's not.
The other question before we open it up to an open Q&A, regardless of topic, is the unfortunate reality we've seen over last year and this year's rising youth violence in our city. We've seen tremendous income disparity. There's been flight of the middle class. We've seen upper echelon incomes grow, folks, and also those who are lower income. Sociologists tell us when we see disparity, crime, social impacts grow. And it's sad to see the growth in many young Torontonians, 14, 15, 16, being arrested for some of the robberies that we're seeing, armed robberies, both in Toronto and surrounding GTA municipalities. The province traditionally supports youth programming through transfer payments, through funding. How will your voice and your party address rising youth violence when in power? And please be specific to what approaches and the thinking that you would bring as an MP.
I will start off by saying that I've made an attempt to start. I've met with Warren Wilson. He's the superintendent at Division 41. And I've spoken to the other superintendent that's in Division 43 to discuss issues that are going to the police. And their vision, it coincides with the Liberal Party's vision. They said to me that they want more community police. There's only a couple of communities that have them, and I've seen them in action at Gordon Ridge. I go to everything I'm invited to, as I said, so I've been there and I've seen police officers serving hot dogs to children, which I think is so important. They watch these kids grow and these kids want to make them proud. So they have a relationship that works and that helps with you not getting in trouble because they know the police and the police know them. Also too, they said that they wanted mobile crisis intervention teams, and that's something the Ontario Liberal Party has committed to. We're going to double the investment into mobile intervention, and of course that helps to keep people safe and out of jail. And if it's a mental health issue and not a criminal issue, then it needs to be dealt with a certain way. So we've committed to those investments. I also want to emphasize that youth unemployment is a huge issue, and we've committed to cut it in half.
This isn't an issue that's sort of a simple answer to be honest. It's because as you articulated, Councillor, I mean, there's a variety of underlying social issues and so on that cause changes in crime rates. So what are the kind of solutions? Well, definitely we've got to stop and move away. We've turned our police department into a social service agency because we've not properly funded mental health and social services. That, in my mind, has got to be step one. Let's increase the funding, the support services, and that will reduce demand on police, and also people that can reduce situations where people are ending up in the criminal justice system that shouldn't be. And we know that works, and we know it because the City of Toronto actually already has in place community crisis teams that have significantly reduced the engagement of police in, I've forgotten the terminology, person in distress. They do, I think if I remember correctly, 4,000 calls, and 90% of them don't require police intervention anymore because of that kind of service. Correct me if I got the numbers wrong, but that's something like that. We need to build a livable wage for people. So we're committed to doubling Ontario Disability Support Program and Ontario Works. It's already been pointed out, and I agree completely. We've got to create real opportunities for people to get real jobs and have a livable wage and a place to live. So probably like the Liberal Party, we have a number of proposals on how do we address youth, particularly youth unemployment, but unemployment generally, to get people back to work. And those are the kinds of things that are going to help move us away from increases in crime rate and so on.
We'll move to an open Q&A.
So I'm very happy that our councillor did bring up the bike lanes, not as an issue of the bike lanes themselves, but as a question of our local democracy and our autonomy. A little bit of the sales, the wind taken out of my sails. But I wonder if either of you guys are aware of the concept of making Toronto a charter city to sort of improve our autonomy. Because it's kind of surprising that it feels like a vindictive government can sort of mess around with the city. We've seen that with the Ontario Science Centre, Ontario Place, and now the bike lanes. So I wonder if you guys had any thoughts on charter city status or any other thing that we can do to protect our autonomy.
So the short answer is yes, I'm very aware. And the Green Party in its platform has made the commitment to explore, and if the municipality is willing and interested, to put in place some form of charter. So, and the reason is for, as you've already well articulated, to reduce interference from provincial government in local decisions.
I think it's sad that we even have to think that way. The idea of having a hostile premier. I think that municipalities should have autonomy, especially large ones like Toronto, and in terms of supporting and representing the people who live in Toronto. And I think it's interesting that we could have a premier that's at odds with, and I think that the polling shows that. You might have noticed that the Liberal Party is doing amazing in Toronto, because it almost feels like two separate groups. So while I'm not aware of any specific commitment to a charter city, I think it's important that Toronto does have autonomy, and as I said, it's sad that we have to think that way.
So I'd like to build on your question. Many in our community feel 27 years after amalgamation that Scarborough has lost its voice on major planning issues. In the scenario of a charter city setup, do you think there is value in a devolved power structure at the City of Toronto? So for example, the city or the district, as we're referred to now within the City of Toronto, Scarborough has autonomy on our own housing policy, right? As with downtown, North York, and Etobicoke. So in the scenario of charter city, is there value in having a devolution of power given City of Toronto's breadth and depth and diversity?
I mean, I have my own opinion, but I don't think it really matters because what a charter city would do.
I'm asking for it.
But you know, what I'm going to say is, charter city would give the city the autonomy and ability to make that decision for yourself. So if you as council and the residents support it, and you want to move towards that kind of approach, then you have that opportunity. I don't think it should be for me as a provincial representative to say one way or the other.
So should a Etobicoke councillor, a downtown councillor, tell Scarborough councillors they shouldn't have devolved power? It's the same principle. I bring this up.
Yeah,
this
no,
is
I understand.
just organic, full, fun conversations because I moved an amendment because a colleague of mine had requested that the city create a body, an advisory body on municipal autonomy. I got the support of my colleagues to make sure that body or advisory body is made up of people from across the city and not just, I'll be frank, downtown folks. I want folks from Scarborough, SCRO, Etobicoke, North York to have an actual diverse set of thinking around a very tough concept, which is who governs Toronto. Right?
And it didn't go through.
It did go through. It did go through. I got support for that amendment.
So you are taking the approach that I'm suggesting. It's like working together to figure out what is the right solution for Toronto. So
what I'm suggesting is that it's the same. We have to have the same consistency. So the argument is Toronto should govern itself because folks in Barrie shouldn't have a vote on Toronto's decision making. So should a downtown or a Etobicoke councillor have a vote on Scarborough? Anyway, this is all just to get the intellectual juices flowing. Qadira, sorry, I should let you get a say. On, do you think Toronto should then, folks in Scarborough should be able to devolve power from Toronto City Council to, say, Scarborough? If Scarborough wanted to create our own housing policy. It's up to you. It's your personal. This is not, the parties haven't gone into this.
The next question will be, should each riding have their own?
Neighborhood.
I think it's important to say that as it stands right now, we don't have that, and it's important that we have to hear from the constituents in terms of making plans. I am running for provincial level, and I can commit to listening and consulting and paying attention to what matters in this community and advocate for that specifically.
And
I just sort of speaking of autonomy and all that, so what does the province do for the city of Toronto? Like what does the Ontario government do for Ontario? Like I don't know what Toronto, like I realize that Toronto is responsible for our day-to-day stuff, but what is Ontario in charge of? I don't know.
biggest ones, of course, being healthcare, education,
Okay.
housing policy, environment. Feel free to jump in, but those are the big
Okay, and when
buckets.
it comes to the roads, we just mentioned.
The roads city, municipal,
Okay.
highways are provincial.
Highways, okay.
400 Street is DVP.
Okay, and so hydro and et cetera. Well, not so much hydro, because Toronto. Hydro. Anyway, okay, I was just wondering, like, it's like,
What are the big buckets?
yeah, like, what do you do? Yeah, okay.
And how does that affect, if we did have autonomy, how does that affect money coming from the province? If you have a different opinion than what they have, how does that money?
And this is why it's such a good conversation, because they're like, hey, you want to be autonomous, then raise your property taxes if you want transfer payments on, say, youth crime prevention program. So it's a fun, interesting topic. In reality, no, I don't know, Greens, but it's you'd have to rework the Constitution, which is tricky to be able to
Say that.
legally
Can't do that even
separate.
if they-
Yeah.
Oh, if we were to make Toronto essentially its own province,
Or-
definitely, yeah, that's. But a charter city doesn't require like a constitutional conversation.
Thank you for my name is Saidan. I'm a proud neighbor in Scarborough Southwest. First of all, I want to ask my candidate who will win. What are you thinking about if you will win our senior citizen? I will be your senior, I think so after 6 years. You will be increase our benefit. You are increase our old home and others.
So what is their program?
Yes.
So what is
And
your party's?
I want to ask what is your party will protect our green belt?
So we'll come back to that. We'll first get seniors. So what is your party's plan for seniors?
So I mentioned earlier that we are going to take away the land transfer tax for downsizing seniors. That's something specifically for seniors. And of course, we are working on healthcare. We want to have an integrated long-term care program that helps seniors to stay at home. And we want to work towards having less private agencies. I will also say that the Ontario Liberal Party is the only party that has a commission, a seniors commission. So they've been very good at advocating for seniors' rights within the party. You want it?
Oh, sure, you're on.
So I know that they've been pushing us really hard to work towards a public long-term care system. And it's something that I definitely would support, having experienced some of the issues with this dependency on private long-term, PSW agencies. I have a problem with that. I think that we are wasting money doing that. And of course, healthcare is a big thing that affects seniors, and we've committed to, of course, 4 years having a family doctor for everybody and reducing wait times. And we're going to build new schools, and we're going to hire like 3,100 doctors and all of that. So of course, healthcare, housing, and specific plans, and of course, we're working on affordability in a lot of other areas.
Mark? Yep, on seniors.
Yeah. So yeah, the priority is prioritizing care at home. We want people to be able to live in their home that they bought and have lived in for most of their life. So that's very important. And how do you do that? Well, you definitely start to invest in the personal support workers. You provide them, the personal support workers, with a living wage and a workload that they can manage. And that's not about hiring more private sector, but actually let's make it a public sector, so it's a real service that we can control. It's there and it's available to help people live in their home. Time will come that some of us, and I'm getting close to that senior age too, we'll have to look at moving into long-term care of some type. So we need to ensure that we've got the supply to meet the demand. So the Green Party has made a very specific commitment to try and build at least 48,000 new not-for-profit long-term care spaces by the year 2029. The other things that we need to do, we need to reduce the demand on our healthcare system, or in the sense of let's build it back up, repair it, and then do things that we can do to reduce the demand on healthcare. So let's improve our environment. Let's get off using natural gas to supply electricity, because it's annoying, but there's tons of studies that show asthma rates, other respiratory illness goes up as air pollution goes up. So there are things that we can do to reduce the demands on healthcare, and that would then free up the space that's available to seniors and others.
On the second part, which is the green belt, I have a sense of what your answer will be, but I'll play a bit of devil's advocate. We're seeing the approvals of tremendous, dense condos. Not everyone, that may not be everyone's cup of tea. And folks who say, I want to get a detached home out in the suburbs. Would your party reopen the green belt or parts of it, or how do you address that question? Just to play, that's not my opinion, but to play devil's advocate.
Short answer is no. Very clear in our party platform that we can build the new housing that's necessary within the existing defined urban area,
including detached single family.
Definitely. It's a mix of detached, townhousing, low-rise, co-ops, nonprofit housing, and high-rises, right? I mean, all housing types, depending on the community, where, and so on. We definitely would end the Highway 14. 413, sorry, did I get that right? 413. Yes, which is all about facilitating sprawl, and it's going through prime farmland. And where's the best farmland in Canada? Right here in Southern Ontario, in the Fraser Valley in BC. Nowhere else. I mean, yes, we've got tons of farmland on the prairies, but it is not as productive and as valuable as the farmland that we have here today. So the 413 is about facilitating sprawl. And it also is going to go through the green belt, and it's going to pave over the headwaters of the rivers that come into Toronto. And nobody's admitted it because conservatives have eliminated EAs, etc., environmental assessments. But it's going to result in more flooding. With climate change, that's the wrong decision.
I don't think my party can be any more adamant about not being in agreement about the green belt. In fact, we've committed to investigate it within 30 days to see how that $8 billion giveaway even took place. So Bonnie's been very clear that she has no intention to vote on the green belt.
I was remiss. We have viewers online.
Yes, so a quick question from the chat, folks. Individuals asking, you're mentioning hiring 100 doctors over 4 years for the healthcare question. What's the plan, I guess, for both you on healthcare and in Scarborough Southwest specifically?
We've been very adamant in our commitment to get everyone a family doctor within 4 years. It's not just a want, it's a commitment. And we also plan to do that in a lot of ways. 2 new schools for medical students. And we're going to open up those spaces, double the spaces that are available to begin with. Then we're going to help 1,200 internationally trained doctors to get licensed and hire 3,100 doctors in general. And we want to keep people in family medicine. Right now, there's a lot of administrative burden. A lot of people are leaving family medicine, even if they're still doctors, because of the amount of work. We want to stop this fax machine, referrals going back and forth, and centralize a system that will help to keep family doctors as family doctors. We also want to incentivize those who are about to retire so that they don't, so they can stick around a little bit longer, because we know that 2.5 million people don't have a doctor, and that number skyrockets when you account for the people who are about to retire. So we've thought of all the different angles, and we want to incentivize doctors to serve rurally and in northern communities as well. So all of us know the horror stories, I don't need to tell you them, but we made it our #1 priority.
So I know we've been having a very civil discussion here today, but I do have to say one thing. My wife had a emergency health issue and ended up in emergency ward at Michael Garron Hospital. Spent 2 nights in the hallway. What party was in power then? The Liberals. So when they talk about ending hallway medicine, they had the chance to do it. They failed, and we're still doing it, and Doug Ford has only just made it worse. The Green Party, we've got our 4-year plan to rebuild the healthcare system at a cost of $7 billion, which we've identified can be paid primarily by canceling the unnecessary construction of Highway 413. I don't know, I can't get that out. And reallocate those funds to rebuild our healthcare system. So we figured it out, we've identified what we need to do, and we figured out how we're going to pay for it. Specifics: 3,500 more doctors, reduce the administrative burden, pay our healthcare workers fairly, increase nursing student enrollment, address the lack of public support, personal support workers, increase them by 6,800, accelerate the approvals for foreign credentials, and then reduce the demand on our healthcare system. Going back to my comments about supportive housing, the homeless population, that's a big demand on our emergency wards. If we actually address the homeless issue, we move them out of the emergency wards. We fund mental health services, we reduce demand on health services, reduce environmental pollution, etc. So it's about repair it and also fix other things that have caused the problem.
55 years ago, our premier, Robarts, John P. Robarts, opened up the Science Center. In fact, he was a great premier, an actual progressive conservative, and he fought the Toronto mayor at the time, who wanted the Ontario Science Center on the grounds of the CNE. And he said, I want it in North York because it's going to benefit Scarborough, the burgeoning GTA, and wanted to grow attractions outside of the core. What is your party's position on the closure of the Ontario Science Center? Before councillor, I was 12 years in the classroom, took countless field trips from my school at Warden and Ellesmere to the Ontario Science Center. Many teachers I know in Barrie to Whitby will not take their kids to downtown Toronto in our traffic on the Gardiner and the DVP. This is going to substantially be difficult, but also what they're proposing is substantially much smaller. What is your party's position on the Ontario Science Center?
Bonnie Crombie has been very clear that she's very much against it, and I just think it's so impractical to move it downtown. It's a staple in that community, and there's so many people that walk there and depend on it. And I think that it's such a big issue that, again, she's committed to investigate it within 30 days to see how they were able to close it so quickly, and just it wasn't even phased out, it was just shut down. And I think that the infrastructure issues were just an excuse to just put it to bed once and for all, not have to talk about it, not to have consultation, just, oh, there's issues, let's shut it down. And I think that's something that we're going to investigate.
Yeah, bad decision for lots of reasons. And I'm sure that people have seen the drone videos that have shown all the snow that we've gotten in the last few days. The roof didn't collapse, right? So it was a rushed decision. It was a rushed decision from my perspective, obviously, to help justify the ridiculous decisions that have been made around Ontario Place. A decision that started at 300 million is now up to 2.2 billion, I think now. So yeah, the Green Party, of course, we're on board. The Science Center should not be closed. It should be kept where it is. Let's, instead of spending a bucket of money to support a spa, let's rebuild it And let's also cancel the Ontario, or the spot Ontario Place, and make Ontario Place a good place for people too.
Yeah, so there's one more specifically to education here in Scarborough, addressing kind of the inequality that often affects racialized neighborhoods. So looking at Scarborough Southwest, the question is, how can we ensure that all communities are served equally?
In terms of education.
In terms of education funding, yeah.
Well, I mean, education's a crisis right now. And it's largely because of the funding formula that the province has put in place. And I know the council can probably talk in greater detail than I can, but the Green Party's commitment is to increase funding per student by $1,500. That's also a commitment to review the funding model, make sure that we have something in place that works for schools, so that we actually have a model that works for all students. And that includes, funding to increase our staff, increase access to after school care. I'm sorry, yeah. And the other part of it is the capital backlog. A commitment to eliminate the capital backlog in our schools, so that our kids are going to schools that actually aren't leaking roof, leaking, full of mold, etc. That's the broad picture. Like it's about funding our schools so that it actually can deliver the services. I'm not sure the specific issue that the person is raising in terms of racial inequality. If that's the case, I mean, obviously that's wrong and it should be investigated and dealt with.
I will start off by saying that I am on parent council at my kids' school. They are JK and grade 1. And at my school in particular, we raised a lot of money to do the things that we want to do because we're not getting the funding for it. Like, for example, building a gate to keep the JKs safe from the older kids. But not all schools will have the ability to raise those funds and to do the things that they want to do without public funding. And I think a way to ensure that all schools are treated fairly is to hold the school boards accountable regarding their spending. Also too, Doug Ford cut $1,500 per person, and like Mark, we've agreed to put that $1,500 back for every single child. We're going to clear the special ed waiting list. Again, I don't know if that's disproportionate depending on the schools, but we've committed to clearing that waiting list. We've committed to more mental health professionals, social workers, and EAs, which excites me because I actually worked as an EA when I was a social worker in elementary school, and it's a role that I see no longer like in the schools. I'm seeing people, students struggling without having that support, and I know how important it is. So we also committed to free healthy lunch for everybody, and to quadruple funding for school food programs, and also the backlog on repairs. We've committed to that as well. So again, by making sure that all schools are treated the same, it will help to make sure that there's equity in terms of how the schools are functioning.
Last question to wrap up our night goes down to why. Why you? And I'll be a little more pointed. There's a sentiment, and certainly our office has received, that we want to see a change at top, right? There's a conversation I want to stop for it. That's the chatter in so many different spaces and conversations. So why you? Why your party over the others? Why you?
Is this like our closing remarks then, or?
Yes. We can make that.
I had a really clever thing. I thought was clever. I was going to start by saying, if you think Doug Ford's doing a good job, vote for the empty seat over here, because given the way he runs his government and his party, that's about all the voice you're going to get in Scarborough Southwest if you vote for Conservative, but that doesn't work. So, why me? Well, I said a lot in my opening remarks about my background, my history, things that I've achieved, and the approach to how I do things. I'm not going to repeat them. I think I've articulated very well. So that's why me. Why the Green Party? Because we do things differently. We're not offering you the same old, but we're prepared to actually, as I said, reach across the aisle, develop real solutions to the problems that we face today. And it's a solution or an approach that balances the three legs. And it's an approach that will ensure that we have the kind of, the Ontario of today is the Ontario of the future for our children and our grandchildren. The future that there is an environment that they can enjoy, that there's real economic opportunity, and that we have successfully finally addressed a lot of the social issues that we're talking about today. I think, one of the things that I've been hearing, and I've been hearing before the election, is people are frustrated and tired. And, the party that won the last election was the I did not vote party, with 55% of the vote. That really bothers me, that people are saying to me, I'm not going to vote. I don't vote because nothing ever changes. We've got to change that. We've got to set a new path for Ontario where we are doing these politics differently. And we're not running against, I'm not running against the other candidates. I'm running because the parties they represent have created, I think, have partly created, or actually I shouldn't say partly, have created the cynicism that exists today about elections. They keep making campaign promises without actually costing them. The NDP, which aren't here today, but they first campaign promise out the door, we're going to get rid of tolls on the 407. We're all walking around making fun of Doug Ford and the $60 billion, let's build a tunnel under the 401. Well, the 407, it's a $30 billion cost. They didn't cost it. They didn't think it through. It's a promise that polled well. And this is why, because being a politician is not ever my career path. I was quite happy being a retired individual, taking pictures and spending time doing other things. But I think it's time for a change. It's time for a party that isn't going to break its campaign promises. We were the first party out with a platform and a costed platform. The others have finally put out 2 days before the election. Gives you a lot of time to actually look at it. But our platform is something that you can look at. It clearly defines what we're going to do, how much it'll cost, when we'll do it by. You can hold us accountable. So when it's the next election, you look at it and say, Mark, you said you were going to do this. Mark, you're going to do that. And we didn't do it. Well, toss me out. But I'm pretty sure the Green Party is not going to do it. We're committed to this. We want to change things and we want to solve problems and we want to do it with you.
Qadira, the question and closing statement together.
So, I'm not an expert on policy. I'm not an expert on policy. I'm just a person who lives in this riding, happens to be a lawyer, I'm a social worker. And I think that it's important that people know that I'm going through the same struggles that you are. Fought really hard to buy my first house. Struggled with landlords, as I told you my story. My parents came here as immigrants and had to struggle to make it in this community. So my family lived in government housing. My parents were on welfare at one point. And I think that it's important to know that I had these experiences so that I can identify with you, so I can understand your perspective and I can advocate for you properly. I've worked since I was 17 years old in so many different fields that I can almost never find someone that I can't identify with. I've worked in factories with steel toe boots, in retail, in hospitality. And I think that your representative on a local level matters. You need to be someone that you feel that you can be comfortable with, that you can trust. And I hope that I'm someone that you can trust, having had a lot of the same experiences that you may have. And I think it's also important to look at the big picture. And I think that Bonnie Crombie is a strong leader. She has municipal and federal experience already, which will fare well in dealing with municipalities, which is part of the focus of today. And of course, dealing with tariffs on the federal level. She's been on the federal stage already. So in making your decision, I think it's important to look at both. And I will also put a plug in there for voting strategically. As Bonnie has said, we're doing much better in the polls in the NDP. Unless you're a Dougie lover, I think it's important to think strategically in terms of your voting. And if NDP supporters can feel comfortable with me and vote for the Liberal Party, we have a chance to get Doug Ford out. Thank you.
And with that, let's give our Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Qadira, for coming out and participating in what I hope was an enriching, wholesome discussion on issues that are layered, complex, and in many cases sensitive to our neighborhood. And I hope tonight was an opportunity for you as voters, as residents, to gain an insight into the character, the thought, and the care they have for Scarborough Southwest on the issues that are on the ballot box for you, but certainly under the purview of the provincial government. And I hope this is an opportunity to continue to engage with our community on the big issues. As an elected representative, our commitment is beyond just the jurisdiction of our role. It's to the community on large, coming out, coming together to discuss the issues that faces. Who we vote for is completely our own personal choice, but coming together and having a conversation and discussing these challenges are what makes our community stronger, and that's my commitment when I ran for City Councillor. It continues to be in the work that we do collectively, is regardless of our opinions on any issue and any topic, we come together, we chat about them, we build the relationships that make our community stronger. So whoever comes out on Thursday, our offices continue looking to work together, not just with who's elected, but those who want to serve our community in any capacity. So thank you all for coming out for this rich discussion, 2-hour discussion. It'll be online within a day. We'll post it out. We have a mailing list of 6,000 Scarborough Southwest families. We'll share this link with our mailing list and get out and vote. Make sure you get everyone you know to vote. It is abysmal. 6% of Ontarians have voted. It is our civic duty. In so many countries around the world, people are dying for this, and democracy is a culture. It's not just going in to vote. It's a spirit, it's a culture, and we've got to sustain it and preserve it. And to have an election in the dead of winter, I can only feel for you guys, as someone who obviously went through elections, and your campaign teams to put up signs. I could never imagine it. I'm used to fall elections as a municipal person, but wow, it is what it is. But get out and vote. Tell your family, your friends, your street, whoever it is for, get out and vote. Thank you, everyone.